Hi, it's Patrick Hutzel from IntensiveCareHotline.com, where we instantly improve the lives for families of critically ill patients in intensive care so that you can make informed decisions, have peace of mind, real power, real control, and so that you can influence decision making fast, even if you're not a doctor or a nurse in intensive care. In last week's blog I talked about family meetings in intensive care, how to avoid the pitfalls. You can check out last week's blog by clicking on the link below this video, and in this week's blog I want to talk about the 6 deadly excuses that hold you back from making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Part 1. Before I get into today's topic, I want to share a quote with you that I wrote on today's topic, and the quote says, "Most families who have a loved one critically ill in intensive care highly underestimate this once-in-a-lifetime situation that they simply can't afford to get wrong." Most families of critically ill patients in intensive care, when first confronted with this once-in-a-lifetime situation, are frustrated. They are anxious, stressed, worried, overwhelmed, vulnerable. They have sleepless nights, and they are confused by the often tragic events that unfold before their very eyes. Most families of critically ill patients in intensive care can't see the wood for the trees and don't have perspective when their loved one is critically ill in intensive care. And how could they? It takes many years of experience and insider knowledge to understand what's really at stake when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. The consequences of having a loved one critically ill in intensive care can be dramatic, and the consequences can be deadly, quite literal. Therefore, any family who has a loved one critically ill in intensive care and wants to make informed decisions, have peace of mind, control, power and influence needs to advance very quickly, needs to start doing their own research, quickly learn what questions they need to ask. They also need to very quickly learn and understand that what you see is not always what you get in intensive care, because there are so many dynamics and variables at play that families at first have no knowledge about. Intensive care is an extremely volatile as well as highly political environment, and therefore you and your family need to be prepared as much as you can, because if you are not, the consequences can be deadly, quite literally. So let's get into today's topic. If you have read or watched one of my most recent blog posts and videos, which was having your loved one critically ill in intensive care, don't be a victim. You would have seen or read that I have many families of critically ill patients in intensive care come to me when it's too late. This is an extremely worrying trend, and one that has emerged in recent months. I have made the unfortunate experience that many families either find my blog and or seek out my expertise when it's too late. The consequences are dramatic, and the consequences are deadly in a literal sense. Quite frankly, families who had a loved one critically ill in intensive care that passed away during their stay in intensive care are very surprised when they first come to my website that such information even exists. They are so surprised that they feel compelled to become a subscriber to my blog and often make contact, and they share their heartbreaking stories. Some of them go as far and want my counsel and advice directly when it's too late, when their loved one has already passed away in intensive care. Now, I'm very happy to do that, because just as my service is quite literally a hotline where you can call or email and you will get a response and answer to your questions, I also see my service as a bereavement counseling service whenever needed. However, it's also breaking my heart when I hear that people have lost their mother, father, husband, wife, brother, sister, or, as recently happened, even their children. Having worked with hundreds and even thousands of families in intensive care during some of the most dramatic situations in intensive care, where they have lost a loved one, I have intimate insights and knowledge how to professionally deal with such trauma and help those families who experience such trauma and loss. However, the fact of the matter is that I would much more prefer that you'd come to my website when it's not too late, when you still have time to make decisions and influence the outcomes. I can help you with bereavement counseling. However, I would much rather help you to save your critically ill loved one's life, if I can, by sharing my insights, my skills, my expertise, and my more than 15 years intensive care nursing experience in 3 different countries, where I literally worked with thousands of critically ill patients and their families. In fact, I ran an online webinar this week where 2 of the attendees recently lost their partner and their child respectively in intensive care, and they are now seeking for answers. It doesn't have to be that way. Wouldn't you much rather come to me and seek out my advice before it's not too late? I have also worked as a nurse unit manager in intensive care for more than 5 years, and I have had more than enough insights into the world that is intensive care to know and understand how and what the intensive care team is choosing to communicate to you and what they don't. And I would much rather share my insights and expertise with you when it's not too late. I would much rather empower you to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence, so that you can confidently step forward and challenge the intensive care team on any of their assumptions and positioning. Some of the families who have lost a loved one in intensive care are even buying some of my ebooks and videos that would have helped them before their loved one passed away in the first place. Some of the families who have lost a loved one in intensive care are also buying my one-on-one email or phone counseling and consulting services to find out what has happened during their loved one's ICU stay. Again, I can do all of that for you, and I can help you with that. I can help you finding peace and make meaning out of those very difficult and heartbreaking situations. But again, I would much rather you'd invest in the information in my ebooks and videos, or in my one-on-one Skype or phone counseling and consulting, or email counseling and consulting sessions up front, so that you maximize your chances to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence, and hopefully save your critically ill loved one's life in the process. You may or may not be able to save your critically ill loved one's life by using my services, whether it's through accessing me directly or whether it's through accessing my ebooks, videos and audio recordings. What I can promise you though is that by accessing me personally or by accessing my published information, you will be in a position to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence, even if your loved one is inevitably dying. You need to make sure that the intensive care team is doing all the right things one way or another. Me and my information will help you exactly to do that and get a handle on things that are happening around you, and they can happen at lightning speed. However, for those of you watching this and for those of you who have a loved one critically ill in intensive care right now at this point in time, let me be crystal clear here once again, that you can't afford to passively watch this event go by and sit on the sidelines no matter the outcome. If you are watching this right now, chances are that your critically ill loved one is in intensive care and is currently either very unstable and in a very critical condition, or they are in a life-threatening situation, or they're not waking up after an induced coma, or they are in intensive care for long-term treatments and long-term stays, including long-term ventilation, or they're having a severe or traumatic head or brain injury, or they are threatened with an NFR, not for resuscitation, or DNR, do not resuscitate order, or they are in a situation where the intensive care team suggests that a withdrawal of treatment or a limitation of treatment could be quote-unquote in the best interest for your critically ill loved one, or your loved one may even be approaching their end of life in intensive care. And during those situations that I've just mentioned, there is a very high chance that your critically ill loved one is at risk of dying. Let me say this again. During the situations that I just mentioned, your critically ill loved one is at risk of dying, period. Therefore, you may not be in a position to accurately assess that risk, and neither are you often in a position to interpret and evaluate the information the intensive care team is giving you or is not giving you by withholding information. After working with and talking to thousands of critically ill patients and their families in intensive care, again, either in my clinical practice, on my one-on-one phone and Skype counseling and consulting service, or in my email counseling and consulting service, I have found that most families of critically ill patients in intensive care are not prepared to step up to the plate and do what is necessary to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence. And I go as far to say that, as a matter of fact, 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care don't make informed decisions, don't get peace of mind, control, power, and influence, period. They keep on making excuses, and I have seen and identified 6 of the most common and also deadly excuses they keep making. So let's get into them. Number 1. Deadly excuse number 1. Families in intensive care think they have no time to do their own research. The 99% of the families of critically ill patients in intensive care who make no informed decisions, have no peace of mind, no control, no power, and no influence, say that they have no time to do their own research. Okay, I get it. Your loved one is critically ill in intensive care, and you are just so overwhelmed by it that you think you can't deal with this in a rational manner, or let alone finding time to deal with this besides listening to what the intensive care team is telling you. I know you've got a busy life, and I understand you've got kids, you've got a spouse, you probably have a busy career, and you might have your mother to look after whilst your dad is in intensive care. I get it. This is not the situation you have been waiting for. However, by you doing your own research, it's probably the best time you'll ever spend, especially if it helps you to get on the right path, and especially if it helps you to potentially save your critically ill loved one's life. But even if you can't save your critically ill loved one's life, you still have to find out whether the intensive care team is doing the right thing or not. No matter the situation, you still need to be in a position to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence. The fact of the matter is that if you do invest the time to start doing your own research, if you do invest reading or watching my free instant impact report, if you start reading or watching some of the hundreds of questions that I answered for families in intensive care just like you will find very quickly that you can't afford not to make time to do your own research when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Deadly excuse number 2. Families in intensive care think that the intensive care team knows what they are doing. I'll give you a quick example for that. I had a client recently that took up my one-on-one phone and Skype counseling and consulting service. The client's dad had been in ICU for over 6 weeks when they first contacted me. The client's dad had cardiomyopathy, which is a rare heart muscle disease, a heart muscle weakness, and the client's dad had been in an induced coma for over 4 weeks with no tracheostomy. Depending on where you are at in your journey through the intensive care landscape, 4 weeks in an induced coma on a ventilator in intensive care with no tracheostomy screams negligence to me. Mind you, this was in a first world country. A tracheostomy should be done after a couple of weeks at the latest when an induced coma is prolonged. The first thing I said to this client is that his dad needs a tracheostomy as soon as possible so that he can be woken up out of the induced coma. The client went back to the intensive care team with this demand, and they were doing a tracheostomy on their dad within the next 48 hours because I gave the client all the information they needed to have why their dad needed a tracheostomy. Therefore, if you are not prepared to do your own research, the intensive care team can pretty much do whatever they like. It's imperative that you check on easily available and mostly free online information and talk to the people who know what they're talking about, and that will give you most of the answers to your questions. And keep in mind, you don't have to be sitting at home to do your own research. You can do it on the go, on your mobile phone or on your iPad. Or of course you can do it in the comfort of your own home with your laptop or your desktop. You can read the info, watch the videos or listen to the podcast. And I'm only a phone call or an email away. So this was part 1 of the 6 deadly excuses that hold you back from making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence when your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Check out part 2, it'll come out in the next few days. So, how can you become the best advocate for your critically ill loved one? Make informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence quickly whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. You get to that all-important feeling of making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence when you download your free instant impact report now by entering your email below. In your free instant impact report, you learn quickly how to make informed decisions, get peace of mind, real power and real control, and how you can influence decision making fast whilst your loved one is critically ill in intensive care. Your free instant impact report gives you in-depth insight that you must know whilst your loved one is critically ill or is even dying in intensive care. Sign up and download your free instant impact report now by entering your email below. In your free instant impact report, you learn how to speak the secret intensive care language so that the doctors and the nurses know straight away that you are an insider and that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care. In your free report, you will also discover how to ask the doctors and the nurses the right questions, discover the many competing interests in intensive care and how your critically ill loved one's treatment may depend on those competing interests. How to eliminate fear, frustration, stress, struggle and vulnerability even if your loved one is dying. You get 5 mind-blowing tips and strategies helping you to get on the right path to making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power and influence in your situation. You'll get real-world examples that you can easily adapt to your critically ill loved one's situation. How to stop being intimidated by the intensive care team and how you will be seen as equals. You'll get crucial behind-the-scenes insight so that you know and understand what's really happening in intensive care and how you need to manage doctors and nurses in intensive care, and it's not what you think. Thank you for tuning into this week's blog, and I'll see you again next week in another update. Make sure you also check out our Your Questions Answered section where I answer your questions, or simply send me an email to support@intensivecarehotline.com with your questions. Or you can call me. Find international phone numbers on our contacts tab. Also, check out our ebook section where you get more ebooks, videos and audio recordings, and where you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me via Skype or over the phone, and via email by clicking on the email and phone counseling tabs on the top of the website. This is Patrick Hutzel from intensivecarehotline.com, and I'll see you again next week in another update.